Welcome, your backup plan tribe, to another show with Tina, Talking Taboo with Tina. We're here. Welcome. If you are new here, my name is Tina Kim, and I am an emergency preparedness coach, a best-selling author of In the Blink of an Eye. Yes, just like that. That's how fast things can happen, just in the blink of an eye. I am a financial expert and an app developer of Your Backup Plan app, and I'm located here in Vancouver, BC. If you are new here, welcome. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Please do, because I'm going to get my hand out. And where the heck is it? There. Just subscribe down below, follow, subscribe, and click on that bell so you get notified of our upcoming videos and broadcasts. We focus on real, raw conversations with our listeners about their journey from a life-changing event in their life. And it's brought to you by Your Backup Plan app. And you might say, Tina, what is Your Backup Plan app anyways? It puts your life all in one place in case of any unpredictable circumstance, while taking the painful aftermath out of the tragedy. And you might say, Tina, what does that mean? And I'll say one thing you can count on. And I hate to tell you, but we're all going to die at some point. We're just not sure how, when, or what. We're all going to get maybe sick or disabled, injured, or lose everything in a disaster or a tragedy. And so I'm here to help you guys be better prepared for the unexpected. And everybody has this mentality of it's not going to happen to me because you're Superman. And it will happen to you because we are all here on this world to perhaps, have something happen to us. And we want to be better prepared. So it takes that pain out of trying to get organized with your own stuff, or maybe you're helping someone else out, or for your loved ones. The condo collapse in Florida was the ideal, unfortunate event that showed everyone how fast things can happen, how fast you're just sitting in your condo or lying on your bed, and all of a sudden your whole building is gone. And that's how fast things can happen. So I ask you this: why aren't we better prepared? Our provinces, our states, our countries are not prepared. We aren't. And it's the first thing that these senators and leaders do when they come out to the emergency or the tragedy or the scene, is they say, we never expected something this big or something like this to happen. So if they're not prepared, why do you think we should not be prepared? I think I had 2 negatives in that sentence, but that's okay. So I just want to help people do their own DIY plans. We are coming out launching a blueprint program very soon with a library of videos, interviews of attorneys, lawyers from around the world. And you can pick and choose which video to watch, 15, 10, 20 minutes long. And really, I wanted to empower each and every one to understand what they have in documents, understand what they have in the financial world, understand what resources are out there to help people, and to know when you go to look for something in particular that you'll be able to ask those right questions. So let's get this party started. I'm so happy that you've come to our show today. And I'd like to welcome our United States and our Canadian, as well as our third biggest group is Germany. And Ireland is next. So I'd like to welcome also our German listeners. Meine deutsche Freunde sind unserem Podcast willkommen. Wenn Sie Kommentare haben, können Sie gern Fragen stellen. Also danke für deine Freundschaft. Und danke fürs Hören, meine deutsche Freunde. So thank you so very, very much for listening, everybody. I appreciate you being here and sending you lots of love. Let's get this party started with our guest, how to deal with so many losses. Yes. Have we not dealt with this during these pandemic? I have heard from so many clients that it's been so very difficult, not knowing where to turn, not knowing what to do. And our guest today is from Texas, and her name is Genesis Amaris Kemp. And I'm going to bring her on right now. There she is.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Tina.
You're very, very welcome. And Genesis is a creative content writer from Texas. Author, self-development advocate, visionary, inclusion and diversity enthusiast, firecracker, and a force to be reckoned with. Now, that's an awesome first introduction, isn't it?
Yes. I definitely tell people I'm a ball of energy, that's for sure. But even though I'm multifaceted and multidimensional, don't place me in a box because I wasn't born in a box and I am not going to be in a box until it's time for me to pass on to the afterlife.
There you go. And yeah, maybe not even then. Maybe you'll decide to do something else with yourself. But Genesis has come on, and you have quite an interesting journey that you've been going through. And I'd like to share with everyone, as well as her information is down below in the description box for everyone. So Genesis, where do you think this journey started for you? You've had multitude of things happen.
Well, the losses really started in 2020, November to be exact. And I like to say it was far from perfect vision, but a slap of reality. That's actually one of the titles in my book. And November 2020 was when I lost my dad, my best friend, my other part. I was hands down a daddy girl. And, ever since I was a little girl, it was always me and my dad, even though my parents were married up until my dad passed away. I've just always gravitated to my dad, and he's just been my hero, and I was his shero. And it started, to be honest, due to medical negligence. My dad
Oh
walked
no.
into the hospital fine, walking into the doors. The only thing that led him to the hospital was his blood sugar levels being elevated. 3 days later, my dad gets paralyzed from the waist down. I then asked, was it due to a stroke? They said no. Then later on down the line, we found out that my dad did have a stroke, but it went undetected. He went through multiple facilities. It just took a turn, and it's hard whenever you see somebody who's 100% independent go to a dependent state where they're then wheelchair bound and their entire quality of life changes, because no one foresaw that happening. And it was like after that happened, I had to pick up the pieces for myself, but also my mother, because my dad took her everywhere. He drove her to her work, her doctor's appointments, and etc. On top of me working a full-time job and being a wife, there was a lot of complexities that were involved. And then I had to kick in the drive of being a patient advocate to advocate for my dad while going through a pandemic. And people were so gung ho about the pandemic. Yes, it's important. And the people who were dealing with COVID, they did matter. But what about the ones without COVID who went to the hospital for something minor? And because you failed to look at certain things, it caused them their life to say. Because it was just one thing led to another. And my dad gets paralyzed from the waist down, goes to rehab, gets worse, ends up with a
Oh,
bed sore. The bed sore opens up. Then my dad gets sepsis, has to
an
have emergency,
infection.
yeah, gets an infection, has emergency neck surgery. I had to consent for the surgery, then goes to long-term acute care where they're not properly taking care of my dad. So he's going through suffering. Then I bring him home here to do home health. And that's a lot because I'm not a nurse, so I'm learning
Yeah.
everything on the fly. But thank God I have family members who are in the medical field, who are nurses or nurse practitioners that were able to coach me along the way. And I had a really good friend of mine, one of my really dearest friends from high school, came over to work with my dad on the physical therapy side to, strengthen his arms and get his legs moving and etc. But it just wasn't enough. And I knew my dad was tired, but I didn't foresee my dad passing so soon and suddenly.
So where do you think the sudden part came from?
Just them not properly taking care of him in the hospital, because anyone knows someone with diabetes, and if you have a wound, it takes a lot longer for the wound to heal. Um, then if the wound gets infected, you have to go through more procedures, and then whenever you're telling physicians to do certain things, they feel like, why should I listen to you when you're not in my shoes? Because there were certain things that we were advocating for my father that did not get approved until he got worser. And then when he did go back to the hospital for his last surgery, 8 days later he passed unexpectedly.
Wow, that's crazy.
So that was the first really hard thing for me. It's still kind of hard to talk about it because, it's still very fresh. But if I could share my stories and the pain and frustration to help somebody else not have to go through that,
Yeah.
I think that's a part of me helping continue the legacy, but also helping others know what to do. Like,
Yeah.
okay, does your family member have a will? Does your family member have certain things in place? Because no one likes to think about death because it's
No.
very vain and morbid, but these are things that we should think about. So whenever push comes to shove, you are prepared versus unprepared, and you have so many different voices and people vying for your attention at such a critical time that it begins to overwhelm you, and then you could easily hit a period of burnt out while dealing with loss.
I've had clients that have actually um, gone through something similar to that. And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that have either know someone or they're doing it themselves. But when they go through it, I mean, sometimes they break down after. You have a real burnout, you have a real stressed burnout, and you're incapable of doing anything for 2 or 3 months, basically, just trying to heal yourself after something so tragic. It takes so much out of you, because you're thinking you're helping the person like your dad out at the time. And then to find out all of a sudden that changes. And then now you're into that other section of stress. So
Yeah.
how was your mom?
So my mom is good. She has her moments because her after losing someone that you've been with for 30 years, that definitely takes a toll on you. And I think that her grief is totally different than mine because she lost her husband. And I can't say what it's like to lose a husband because mine is still living, but I lost a father. But I can say what it's like to grieve the loss of one, a loved one, but then two, a father, which is, it's different when you lose a parent. That's a different
Yeah.
type of grief that someone goes through.
Yeah.
Then to make it sweeter, not necessarily in a good way. After that, I found out I was being laid off from my corporate job where I worked there for 7.5 years for a particular Fortune 500 oil and gas company. And I was the only one working on this particular project that was very proprietary for 3.5 years. And it was just very insensitive because it was literally 1 week after my father passed that I
Oh
got the
dear.
phone call saying that I was being laid off due to the pandemic. And I was like, well, I just don't understand how someone who works in global supply chain with a supply chain degree that's in trade regulations and compliance is being laid off, because trade regulations and compliance is a bread and butter of a business, because you need to be in compliance, you need to have regulatory affairs, and you need to have your due diligence to make sure that everything is running well. so you don't
Yeah.
have any risk, so you can mitigate those risks so you don't face any penalties or fines. And then later on down the line, fast forward it, you find out that if you left before doing a proper job handover, then they can withhold your severance package from you and the benefits that are due to you, which is money that you've paid in, things that you have done to secure. So then it's like, okay, you're going to be laid off, but it won't be effective until February. But we want you to transition and hand this off to somebody else.
Yeah. And how do you think that how did you feel after those 2 hit you?
Um,
Because the one was
Mad.
enough.
Yeah, I definitely felt mad. I felt angry. I felt betrayed. I felt like it couldn't have happened at a worse time
Yeah.
because my dad passed right before Thanksgiving, the day before, and Thanksgiving was one of our favorite holidays. So going into Thanksgiving the next day was very hard, especially knowing that you have people coming over to your house, but you have to kind of compose yourself to entertain and not be, negative Nancy or,
Yeah.
sour Susie, because you have to put on this perfect face and act like everything's okay when inside you're crumbling because you just lost someone. Then when I lost my job, I was upset because I was like, I've been with this company for 7.5 years. I had just gotten a $20,000 salary increase, which was a big salary raise. And, my performance review was good. And then it's like a slap in the face to find out that you're going to be laid off. So I was taken back by it. I also felt deceived. To the point where at first you tell me that my position was dissolving, and anyone that hears dissolving knows that your position is going to be obsolete. But then
Yeah.
you come back and tell me that you want me to do a job handover and transition with somebody, which is contradictory to what you first told me. So that means that you're replacing me with somebody who's closer to retirement age because within 3 years that attrition is going to kick in and that person's going to be out the door. So that was very insensitive. And then versus asking me, how are you doing with the loss of your father? You're calling me to tell me about a layoff. Like,
Yeah.
who does that? So I was angry as hell, but then, fast forwarding, I felt relief because I did want to leave the high stress environment and job because I knew there was more that needed to be done purpose wise, which everything worked together to lead me to the path I'm on now, which is, being a visionary life coach, an author. Had I never went through certain things with this Fortune 500 company, it wouldn't have given me the strength. Sorry, it wouldn't have given me the strength and the oomph to write
Yeah.
my book, Chocolate Drop in Corporate America, because it was my experiences that I went through.
Oh, nice. That's
And I
cool.
I really wanted to show people that just because you may look differently than somebody else does not mean your voice doesn't carry weight or etc. Just because you may not have everything planned out does not mean you're not going to reach your final destination. It does take preparation in order to prepare your purpose.
Just like the
So,
backup plan does.
yes. Um, then the third whammy was 9 months and 5 days later from my dad's passing. I lost my grandmother on August 29th, 2021. And that hurt because me and my grandmother were just getting on terms and just beginning to form our bond because she moved away when I was younger to Minnesota, and we really got connected when she came to visit in 2018 for my wedding because I didn't think that she was going to come. And just to get so close to her and just see how um, my father's passing affected her, because my dad was one of the youngest boy out of a total of 8 kids.
Oh,
And
wow.
my grandmother just really mourned him
Mhm.
to death, especially in our culture, because I am Caribbean and South American, and my grandmother was half white, half black. Um, it was very heart wrenching, and She had actually got COVID from her
Oh,
house cleaner who went to clean her house. And I was like, if you knew you were sick, why would you even go clean my grandmother's house? So
yeah.
then she's dealing with the aftermath. She's getting over COVID, just recovering, and then bam, my dad passes. So she's going through her own um, health battles on top of mourning. So that's a double whammy.
Yeah.
Then she fell at my aunt's house, and when she fell, the ambulance was called. But since we were already in the state of red here in Texas, meaning we were at the highest capacity COVID level wise. Hospitals were on a drive by. So when they came to the house for my grandmother, they said there's no hospital rooms available. So pretty much, versus taking my grandmother to the hospital, she was left there at my aunt's house to just pass because there was nowhere to take her. And can
Right.
you imagine seeing your loved one lying on the floor just slowly withering away? Whereas if people would have took precautions and we would have, addressed COVID ahead of the curve versus after the curve, we could
Yeah.
have saved lives.
Yes. Well, and that's everywhere, right? Doesn't
Yeah.
matter where you were living, I'm sure.
So that was another heart wrenching. So it was like that was number three. Then recently, this year, January 23rd, my grandmother, which is my mother's mother, passed. She was 99 years old. And, some people said, oh, well, she was 99. She lived a great life. But, you
It
know,
doesn't take the pain away.
absolutely, it doesn't. But the good thing I could say is that I was able to travel to the Caribbean and visit my grandmother. And I got to share with her some very precious news that my community will find out about later on in some months. And my husband was able to meet her because she wasn't able to travel for our wedding due to various circumstances. So that was really good that we got to really celebrate that time with her. And even though she was in and out memory wise, she was
Mhm.
still sharp and witty with certain things. And I was just glad to have been there. But to have her pass 9 months before her 100th birthday, it was just like, oh my gosh. But, who can say that they made it to 99? So when I look at all the different losses between my father, my job, both of my grandmothers, I look at the silver lining and say that no one can predict the time, the day, the hour when you pass, but you can take preparations now when you are healthy, whole, and well to make sure that your family members can grieve in a healthy way without going through, the
Yeah.
emotions of not knowing what your final wishes are, not knowing where certain security things are, not knowing where important documents are, to make sure that there is a smooth transition and you are either laid away comfortably to your liking or you are cremated to your liking, whichever you choose, whether it's burial or cremation, your final wishes are granted. But if you never take the time to solidify that and have a backup plan, not just for you in the living, but for those who are going to take on your property after you pass, then I feel like you're missing the buck because it's not fair to leave your loved ones who are grieving, they're grieving your loss, but then they're also suffering because some people, they may have to take over your debt.
Yeah.
Depending where you are and pay off certain things. They may have to take over, your children. And if they're not
Your
prepared,
pets.
yeah, your pets. There's so many different things that go involved. And sometimes I think we fail to miss it because we think, oh, you know what? That's later on. That's later on. I could do it. And you procrastinate and procrastinate that before you know it, it comes like that. And everyone's scrambling to put certain things together. Like, oh, do you want an autopsy? Yes or no? And if you pass in the hospital here in the States, in Texas, the hospital decides if you are a contestant for autopsy. And if not, you're paying out of pocket, which could easily be 5 grand or more. And if you don't have the funds set aside, you don't have the comfort to really know why your loved one passed, because you're then deciding, okay, do I take this 5 grand to do an autopsy, or do I take this 5 grand to make sure that they have a nice homegoing service and a nice funeral and certain things like that? So then you're torn between various things.
Yeah, that would be really, really tough because in a lot of cases you want to know
Yeah,
what they died of because helps the others as well, right, in the family to know.
absolutely. And it just
Yeah,
puts you at ease, because anyone knows when you go to your PCP, that's your primary care physician, they ask, what is your family line? What have they suffered with? And if you don't really know how to answer that, then you could also be setting yourself back, because you're
yeah,
not answering questions that can, prolong the longevity of your life.
yes. And that's why a lot of people are doing the DNA now to find out about the family's DNA and health because of that. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear all of that mess. My goodness, that was quite the 2 years, wasn't it?
Yes, very much
So,
so.
was everything was your dad organized, do you think, or was that kind of messy, or what about the afterwards part for you?
He was organized to an extent. He died without a will. I did tell him and my mom years ago, whenever my company was offering wills for not just employees, but their immediate family members, and it was free of charge. And they just never got around, to doing it
And
for my
how many
dad.
people do that, right?
Yeah, because they feel like, "Oh, I could do it later on." But even, and I wanna plug this, even if you don't go get a will done in front of an attorney, you can write it down on a piece of paper, and as long as it's in your own handwriting and you sign it, that will still hold up in court, and that will prevent your loved one properties from going to probate. And probate could be very messy, because
Yes.
if there is a wife, the wife has a say so. If there are children, the children have say so, and etc. And that's when sometimes the ugliness comes out in families, because some kids may not have been there for their parents, but they still are entitled for certain things. And so it's like they're reaping the benefits for something they didn't even sow.
Well, especially blended families now. I
Yeah.
mean, what percentage are blended? A lot.
Yeah.
And and when we don't have any preparation, when you do write it down like that, I had a client, believe it or not, who did write an actual will down and signed by him, but it
Mhm.
didn't go through the attorney. It was what, like a will kit kind of
Mhm.
idea, like a document that you do. And when he did die of a heart attack, his family members, he didn't have any children or a wife, but he had two brothers, one sister, and two nephews. And he wanted everything to go to the two nephews. He always said that. He helped them out with financing sometimes. He did all sorts of things as a great uncle would. But when the time came and he passed, the brothers, the two brothers and the sister came into his apartment, found the written will, and tore it up.
That's
Now,
crazy.
well, and then so who does it go to? Like he had his nephews written on the will, but it goes to the brothers and sister first without a will. So they ripped up the will so that they would get it.
And that's very sad, and that teaches us a valuable lesson, which is where the backup plan comes in. If you had that hard copy will, you could have easily took a picture of it
Yeah.
and scanned it and stored it in a place such as the backup plan app, so that way other people have it there. And I always believe, especially coming from a compliance background, is always have multiple copies. Like keep a
Yes.
hard copy, keep an electronic copy, and then also keep a copy where you delegate it to a trusted source, where if
Yes.
something were to happen, they could supply that information. And also make sure that wherever you store your documents, whether it's on a cloud,
Yeah.
whether it's in a safety security box, that you practice cybersecurity, that there is a way that no one can tamper with any of your documents, because we all know cybersecurity is real. We all know that theft is real. So always make
Yes.
sure you do your due diligence and you keep everything tightly secured, and never give out your information to someone who may be phishing, because there's a lot of phishing attempts, and it happens a
Yeah.
lot with older people where they get different phone calls from life insurance, Medicaid, no, Medicare, and
Yeah.
different places that are trying to poach their information. And you may be in a vulnerable state, whether you're dealing with grief from the loss of someone, that you
Yes.
just, willy-nilly give out that information, and before you know it, your social security is out there in the wrong hands. Your home information is out there, and so many other proprietary information is out there in the wrong hands of these crooks and criminals who are,
Yeah.
just making a fortune off of someone who is in a vulnerable state.
That's for sure. I couldn't have said it any better. And with the app, I'm lucky enough that you can take photos. So like let's say if this is your will, you just um, take a picture of the front cover. It's not showing any real information, so to speak, for cyber safety, but it's telling the person that you've given this information to in when you set up your program that here's where it is, here's the drawer it is in the kitchen, or here's the safe where it's at, or wherever that you've given that information to of your documents. So you don't have to take any particular account numbers or anything like that. It's just particularly information so that people know where to find it. I've had people go back to the house after the person's passed and try and find their will, and it was in the top of a garbage can. And Home Depot flyers were in a safe. Like, really? Why do you have Home Depot stuff in a safe? Shout out to Home Depot there, but but anyways, yes, it's so true, and I guess you and I kind of think the same way because of compliance and having your ducks in a row, and thinking of to think about it in a fun, like we have workshops where you can just have a glass of wine and appies and go through the worksheet and tick off the boxes, and what kind of thing did you want, mom? What kind of funeral would you like? Where would you like to go? What would you like to leave? All of these questions, and it makes it so simple. If we just took a minute to do it, it would make life so much easier.
And that's one thing that I encourage people to do is, while you're healthy, do pre-planning. And did you know that if you did pre-planning up front, whether you're pre-planning for your burial or your cremation, whatever rates you secure today are locked in, because the price of burial is increasing on a daily basis, especially with the aftermath of COVID and still dealing with COVID to some
Yes.
extent. To bury someone, just to open and close the ground, starts at $10,000 depending on where you're located. And then there are certain cemeteries that require a OBC, which is a outer burial container. So
Yeah.
not only do you have to buy the casket, but you have to buy the cemented container that goes that the casket goes
Goes
inside,
in.
because you may be in a specific area, which is a floodplain, flood zone. So that's a additional money that you have to fork out. So a lot of people choose to do cremation because it is cheaper, but you shouldn't let money be the reason why you can't put your loved one away in the way that they have um,
Wished.
wanted, yeah, that
Mhm.
they have wished. So if you did your own pre-planning, you're also making sure that you are deciding how you are going to be laid to rest, your final wishes, and no one can tamper with it because it's already pre-planned, and you're also locking in a steady rate. So that's also another way that you could do your own due diligence and have your own backup plan and save your family the heartache from
Mhm.
dealing with all of that after you've gone on to, whether you believe in the afterlife or wherever.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's crazy, and you've gone through 3 of them now, right? At the funeral home, so
Yeah.
I couldn't believe how many questions they ask at the funeral home. There's like 100 questions about the person, and I would say half of them, you think you know the person really well, and it's like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to look that up because I don't know the answers."
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot. And people, you don't know it unless you're actually in the predicament. If they have teeth or not, do you want to bury them with their dentures, or embalming, or that's another charge? And
Yeah.
what do you want them to wear? Like, do you want an open casket or a closed casket? Do you have pallbearers? Do you want a slideshow or not? What part of the cemetery do you want to be buried? Do you want them to be buried in? Some people say, oh, well, the closer to the back you go, it's more peaceful. And I'm like, seriously, did you just tell me that? Who is it peaceful for when they're dead already? And I'm like, not trying to be rude, but like, I just want a nice spot. Like, and of course, the people at the funeral home and the cemetery, their job is to sell. So as long as they're making a sale, but I'm like, seriously, the more peaceful you go back, and we have the tranquility, and we have the waterfall, and da 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 and da da da, and I'm like, okay.
Yes. I've actually gone with a few older women to the funeral home just so because when you're in that mindset of it just happening, you can't think, and so it's nice to bring someone else that isn't attached emotionally to it so that they can make proper decisions.
Yeah.
But
And if you
it's hard.
very, very hard. And some people don't even realize that you have to pay for the police escorts for funerals, because if you're traveling from the church or the funeral home to the cemetery, whenever that hearse pulls out and there is a procession of cars, you have to pay for the escorts that go along to make sure that there are no other cars that, intercede with that procession, and everyone gets through in an orderly and timely fashion. And I was like, oh my gosh. And, depending on how many cars there are, they tell you how many escorts would be needed, and they are pricey.
Yeah,
And I'm like, "Oh my gosh," it's just like little minute details that people don't tell you about.
that's for sure. And then you like, how did I get into this mess?
Yeah.
After with all these questions. So where did that take you after that? It took you to your book? Is that what you started doing first?
So I started my book first before my dad passed, and my book came out in May. But where it led me afterwards, after my dad had passed in February of 2021, I went and did a revision to my book. And that's when I talked about 2020 as a whole. And that's what I alluded with when I started with. I called it Far from Perfect Vision. You get it, 2020, but a slap of reality, because no matter where you were socioeconomic wise, color wise, race wise, religion, the pandemic all made us hit that reset button, whether we liked it or not. So then I went on to doing podcasts. I've been on over 400 plus podcasts as a guest now. I started my own podcast in November of 2020, where I interview people around the core pillars to educate, inspire, and motivate, all while connecting the dots of DEI and B, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, since that is tied to my heartstrings, especially being first generation American and living in a melting pot.
Yes.
Then been in a few magazines. So the book really catapulted things and allowed me to navigate different social media avenues, but also allowed me to connect with other people from all around the world to, share my story, but also to give somebody else hope, whether they were dealing with grief or whether they need a life coach or they wanted to know, well, how did you exit corporate America? Because I'm still young and people are like, yo, you don't look like your age. And to spend 15 years in corporate America, that's a long time. It's a little
Yeah.
over a decade. And, to transition out of corporate into entrepreneurship and authorship, that's totally something that's unfamiliar to some because it's not the traditional quote unquote path. But I'm here to tell people that in life, you always have to have a backup plan, and it may not be one that you set up because maybe you didn't have the proper tools and resources. But by golly gee, whenever you hit that plan B should be a plan that solidifies you, and it should allow you to take ownership back of your life and navigate your own steering wheel, and you be the driver of your own life.
That's for sure. And your own ideals, I guess.
Yeah.
What was I going to ask now? What, after all of that and saying what you said, what, having dealt with this grief, and you never stop dealing with grief, it doesn't go away. But how do you push forward from what you've gone through? I mean, you've gone through 3 in a short period of time, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have had that in their lives as well.
I definitely took time for myself where I didn't do anything that I didn't want to do because I knew it was gonna overexert myself or, just stretch me too thin. So I really took time to get back grounded spiritually because I was questioning my faith. I had a lot of questions. Um, I took time, to hire my own coach, especially being a coach. I feel like every coach should have a coach where a person who has walked in your shoes and has been where you are and has superseded that can then do life with you, and you do it as a partnership where they're not necessarily barking out orders but they're listening to you. I've
Yeah.
had to take my time to really analyze who I was and who I was becoming because each loss is going to look different and everyone is going to grieve differently. So I had to learn how to grieve in a healthy way for myself and not the way that other people were telling me to grieve because what you're dealing with it may be totally different than what I'm dealing with, and just because you're grieving one way does not mean the way that I'm grieving is incorrect. Another thing
Yeah.
that I had to do was journaling really helped me solidified my thoughts. It also allowed me some time to self-reflect on what I wrote, why I wrote it, and really connect to the root. And the root was me and my
Yeah.
feelings, my emotions, and all of that, because no one can tell you how you should feel because they're
No.
not in your shoes. No one can tell you when the time is right for you to stop grieving. And no one can tell you when you should go back to work or when you should sell that property or whatever, because they don't know what emotional ties are lingering there.
What triggers, I
Yes.
find. Certain things just trigger it, and unexpectedly sometimes. So, yeah, you think you're doing all right, and then all of a sudden, something, you hear something or something in a movie or something at work, and just bango, it's changed again. Yeah, grief is a crazy, crazy real thing.
Yeah.
And I found journaling very, very helpful, but you have to be really honest and be upfront in doing it, because putting your thoughts down on paper, sometimes you feel, well, I don't want someone to read this after and think this is how I was thinking. Like, how ridiculous is that? That's the way I was thinking. Be honest, Tina, and jot things down and not feel bad about what you jotted down. It's your journal. So, yeah, that I found that difficult, actually, to be really honest.
And I think Journaling, it does challenge you, and I'm not gonna lie, because it takes you to a place where you have to be vulnerable. And in order to be vulnerable, you have to be willing to go through the healing process. And that's a part of vulnerability. But also with journaling, it also shows you your growth from where you were in that state to where you are now. And you could then compare and contrast, and you could see how maybe what you went through back then and there wasn't
Yeah,
so bad, and everything that has happened to you also happened for you to accelerate, whether you were accelerating personally or professionally, or mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And so I
that's
like
right.
to look at it that way.
Yes, absolutely. And not be sorry for what you wrote down. And what I enjoyed was seeing my growth, because you forget that you're growing in all of
Yeah.
this. And to think that, wow, how far I've come since that point is is actually very empowering. Just for um, your own mental part of who you are and how you changing, I guess. It's funny how these things change us.
Very, very much so, and I like to call it my TNT experience. Some people see TNT as explosives, and I see TNT as a transition as well as a transformation, because you have to transition in order for the transformation to come into fruition.
Right. That's a very cute title. So, what other things would you suggest people take their time, be who they are, journal, and deal with the mess perhaps that someone might have left? Um,
So I will also suggest listening to music, and then so let me just recap. So journaling, taking time to heal on your own terms, maybe talking to a paid professional, whether it's a therapist, a counselor, a life coach, someone that is a non biased, non judgmental person that will help you get through the stage and the state that you are in is always beneficial. And then if you didn't learn anything from this segment, is definitely take time to pre-plan. And by you pre planning, you're getting ahead of the curve, and you're also having your personal backup plan so others are not accounting for it later on in life. And then the last thing that I want to encourage you to do is have fun, and don't see death as something morbid or something negative, because it's something that we're all going to go through. But if you live life on your terms and you live it to the best of your ability, then whenever it's time for your death experience to come, you're going to know that you did everything that you wanted to do with no regrets.
yeah, well, that's the big one, regrets. Um, we all seem to have them at some time or other, don't we? Tell us more about your book. I'm excited to hear more about your book.
So, my book, once again, is called Chocolate Drop in Corporate America, From the Pit to the Palace. And the reason why there's a world there is because the issues that we face in America don't just happen here, but they happen worldwide. There's people from all professionals on the cover of the book, because it takes all of us coming together to really have a diverse, inclusive, equitable, and a sense of belonging here. I said chocolate drop in corporate America because I am melanated, and I did work in corporate America. I was in the good old boys club, oil and gas, where there's a lot of older Caucasian guys, and it's hard to really find your rightful place without being labeled as the B word or aggressive or whatever. And then the subtitle is so important, From the Pit to the Palace, is because sometimes in life you have to go through the pit, which is that dark season, to really appreciate the palace. And what the palace signifies is success. And your success, Tina, is going to look totally different than my success. And your palace, whether it's a house or whatever, is going to look different. And that is okay. We have
Yeah.
to really find a sense of individuality, and we have to understand what our true purpose is and what our mission is while here on earth. And that's why I think that even though you go through those dark seasons, it's not always going to be dark, and there is going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's why whenever we go through storms, and I'm talking about thunderstorms, rainstorms, and all of those things, it always gets dark before it
Yeah.
gets bright. So you're never going to be in that dark season. So just think about those dark seasons as something temporary. And then what I put on the back of the book, just a synopsis, is what challenges in the workplace have you encountered that left you feeling as if you were mistreated? That's number one. The second question is, have others who were unqualified seemingly passed you by in the ranks? Because I feel like we have all been there, no matter what industry you're
Mm-hmm.
in. And then it says, in our daily lives, we're all faced with various trials, whether in the workforce or at home. However, when treated unfairly, it takes courage to stand and fight for what's right. No matter your race, nationality, ethnicity, or background, you can rise to be the game changer. When you use the power of your voice, you shake the atmosphere and cause a domino effect because others will choose to either follow suit or stand in solidarity. On the pages of Chocolate Drop in Corporate America, Genesis has chosen to speak up for not only minorities, but also anyone who has been slighted on the job in any way. From my personal testimony, you will learn how speaking up brought awareness so that long lasting change could be made. We do not win by remaining silent, overlooking injustice, or continuing to practice poor judgment. We win by standing together, engaging in those difficult conversations, and helping one another. Let's
Yes.
work together to create change for future generations to come. Because it's not just about Genesis, it's not just about me, it's about the people that I come in connection with on a daily basis and
Yeah.
how we can work together to make this transformation.
Well, isn't that the truth? And so many people have been hit by that, especially during the pandemic. Um, I know even, restaurants and corporations and just so many different things. How does someone find a life coach that has to do with grief? That has, if you've lost someone and you are struggling to get to that next level in your business, how do you find a life coach that will help you do that, but being not comforting, but knowing that this is part of, like, that loss is part of who you are. So you have to embrace that as well, but be able to move on and move up the ladder or move up to that next level in your business. It's tough to, it's like dating, when you're grieving. So what what kinds of things can someone do to find a life coach that resonates with them?
So, I know there are various social media channels where life coaches hang out. Like, I've seen a lot of life coaches that I've ran across on Clubhouse, which is the new audio app, LinkedIn, because that's a professional based site. There are some providers. Depending on your insurance, where they will give you some referrals to life coaches. But I also encourage people to do your research before you hire a life coach. Look up, their background, do your due diligence, interview them, ask them questions, because at the end of the day, even though there is an exchange monetary wise, you're paying them to help you. You also want to make sure that they are a good fit and
Yeah.
you feel like you're getting something out of the relationship, because you're not just going to be with that coach for a day. You're going to be with them for maybe a few weeks or maybe a few months, and you want to make sure that you're not just throwing money down the drain. So always do your homework, interview them, get a good feel to make sure that you mesh well, and etc.
Yeah, because I find that grief part, unless somebody understands, um, that would be difficult to you have to have that other person on the other side to understand where you're coming from if you're dealing with grief. And I don't think everybody has, or at that time has for them. So they don't understand you, perhaps. So it makes it difficult to find that perfect person that you're looking for. What kind of final messages would, first, where can they find your book? Is it in your website access or Amazon?
Yes. So it's on my website and it's also on Amazon. So if you go to my website, which is my briefcase, and Tina will provide the link,
Yes, down below.
there's a section that says Chocolate Drop Book. The first chapter of the book, I'm giving that away for free. And Amazon, there is the first edition is only available on Kindle, and there's a second edition which is in hard copy. And so that one does not have a Kindle edition.
Okay.
Mhm.
And what final messages would you like the listeners to hear?
So I'm going to leave you with a quote that is
Ah,
from Babe Ruth. It says, "Never let the fear of striking out keep you from playing the game." And the reason why I say never, I like this quote is because if you never let the fear, because fear is a mindset, fear is something that tries to control you. If you never let that fear, intercede with you, then how much further can you be in life? Because if
yeah.
you remain fearless, then you're always going to hit those home runs and those strikes, because there's nothing that is conditioning you to feel that you are less than where you are.
Oh, that's lovely said. I love quotes. Anyways, I'm all about quotes. But how true is that? Because, little kids don't have that fear, and they play hard and have fun, and they don't think, oh, well, that fence might hurt,
Yeah.
or whatever. And look at how far and how much they can grow without that fear stuck on you.
Yeah.
So thank you. That's awesome. So I hate to leave. This has been so great with you, Genesis. Thank you so very much. You've given so many tips to everybody, and all of her information is down below as well, for everyone to reach out to her. Perhaps buy her book would be wonderful, I'm sure. And it's all about learning. This whole world is just take one little. I hope that we've been able to help everybody with one little thing. It's just one little thing that you can take from our show. So thank you so much, Genesis, for coming on our show. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Um, and so stay tuned for our podcasts and our live streams. We have great conversations with some of the most interesting and accomplished people in the world today, just like Genesis here. She's been through a lot, and she's here to share everything that she's learned. And I think you'll be entertained and motivated, informed, and inspired to, reach out and start your own stuff, your own plan, whether it's business plan, or whether it's a backup plan, or whether it's just to get a little bit more organized. And if you are thinking of someone right now in your mind that you love and care about, you should reach out to them. Someone special in your heart. We still have phones, we can text, we can video, and tell them how much you love and care about them today, because you don't know what tomorrow might bring. So thank you all again to our listeners. Thank you for subscribing to our channel. Down here below, click on that bell and click on that subscribe button so you get notified of our videos. We are on all podcast platforms: YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and now TikTok. And we have a Facebook group as well under your backup plan. You're welcome to join on as we have a like-minded community that deals with stuff, I would say, in their lives, maybe with a relationship or with a family member, and they're a bit confused of what to do and how to do it. So yeah, we have great information in there. Thank you again for being here with us today, as well as Genesis. And I'll have to ask, do you know who Carol Burnett is, Genesis?
I do not.
Oh, okay. Well, you'll have to look it up in the old retro shows because she has played in movies and things, but she is a great celebrity, and she always had a song at the end of her show, and I always like to sing it as well. So I'm so glad we had this time together just to have a laugh or sing a song. Seems we just get started, and before you know it, comes a time we have to say so long. So long, everybody. So long. Be kind. Stay safe. Till next time. Bye. Don't go anywhere.